I flew home from Houston yesterday. 3 more days of meetings to prepare for the 2018 ELCA Youth Gathering. In June, we will welcome almost 30,000 high school students, pastors, youth directors, adult leaders, bishops, for 5 days of worship and service and faith formation to the glory of God. It sounds good. It is good. But it's also a daunting task, one that takes 3 years of planning and preparing. And if you go to the ELCA website, you will find a countdown that says we are 227 days from opening night, which is what I'm responsible for. It means that I still have a fair amount of work to do, but the youth gathering is my side job. My real job is here with you, which means that when I travel, I always celebrate a homecoming. Yesterday, it was time to come home. The meetings were supposed to end at 12:30. My flight was at 12:10, which meant that yesterday I took my first Uber from hotel to airport. Now, do you all know what Uber is before I keep going? I mean, if you don't, I'll give you a quick little rundown. On your smartphone, there's a button. You press the button, and you tell them where you're going, and then these people in their cars show up, and they will take you where you're going, and the price is agreed upon beforehand. It's kind of an internet taxi service without the yellow taxi. So I had a colleague who was going with me to the airport. We hired the Uber showed up, and we drove to George Bush Intercontinental. We got to the terminal for my colleague. He jumped out, he took off, we took off to get to my terminal, and then he called me. He said, my bag is in the trunk. And I said, what do you want me to do? He said, well, can I come get it? Because once I get through security, I said, no, there's not enough time. You got to take at least 1 train. That's 3 stops. I will be on the plane, and they will think that this bag is a bomb, because I'm going to leave it somewhere. And so I said, do you need it, or can I take it with me? He said, oh, that'd be great. You take it and then just, ship it this week to Oregon. That's fine. So before we go any farther, I need to stop and say, I am an expert traveler. Do you remember the signs at the airport early on? Casual traveler, people just don't know anything, and then expert traveler? Do you remember those signs? They're not there anymore. But I am an expert traveler. I am well prepared. I've got my little baggie with the 3 ounces of all the liquids that I can take. I don't even need the baggie because I paid and did thumbprints, so I'm pre-check. So I go to the pre-check line, and then the people who don't know anything but bought the pre-check go in the pre-check line. Drives me insane, and so I try to pray for them while we're waiting because they've got laptops and shoes, and they don't need to do any of that stuff. And so I am a careful, well-prepared traveler. And yet we all have moments when, regardless of our preparation, we stumble. So in the airport, I now have 3 carry-ons. So I checked the largest carry-on, and I moved to the TSA security checkpoint with my briefcase and my colleague's little tiny bag. And I have my e-ticket out, and I have my ID, and I scan my e-ticket, and I show him my ID, and he says, great, head on down. It's not very busy, but there's only 1 line open, so you'll need to keep your e-ticket out. So that's a little different, and I'm a little off my game, but I'm going to be fine. And I put the 2 bags on to the conveyor, and the TSA agent sees my e-ticket. He sees it's pre-check. He's like, great, you have to take out your laptop, but other than that, you're fine. And then he said, are both of these bags yours? And I said, well, this one is, but someone gave me this one. Thus began my journey. To which he replied, what? And you just want them to forget that they've heard it. Because in my head, I said, oh, My God, what did I just say? He said, "Do you know what's in the bag?" To which I replied, "No." "Is your friend traveling with you?" To which I replied, "No." "So you haven't opened the bag?" "No." "We're going to take the bag." "Of course you are." Now my one TSA friend is joined by 2 more TSA friends. Now I have 3 TSA friends. "Sir, we'd like you to move over here. We're going to swab your hands." "Of course you are." "And a pat down is also in order." "Of course it is." Can I tell you that security at George H. Bush Intercontinental Airport is really top-notch and well prepared? And yesterday, I was not. Somebody asked at 8:30, I did get the bag back. If that's important, now you know. But my friend, who I love dearly, I have to tell you, I was just a little bit nervous about what might come out of that bag. We're going to leave it right there. "The kingdom of heaven will be like this," says Jesus. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps, and they went to meet the bridegroom. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish, and when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil. They all fell asleep, but at midnight the cry was heard, "The bridegroom is coming." And the bridesmaids got up and they trimmed their lamps, and the 5 wise were prepared, and the 5 foolish had to go shopping. It's interesting that in the story, all 10 expect the bridegroom to come, even though 5 chose not to take extra oil. All 10 expect the bridegroom. All 10 keep vigil. All 10 fall asleep. In the Old Testament, God presents God's self as husband to the people of Israel. God wants that kind of intimate relationship with God's people. In the New Testament, Jesus is the bridegroom prepared to marry the bride, which is the church. That all the bridesmaids were asleep when the bridegroom arrived does not matter. A reminder to us that Jesus will come when God determines the time is right. It will not matter what we are doing. Whatever it is, we must be doing it in such a way that we don't have to make things right when Jesus comes. A testament to being well prepared. And yet I realize in this life, one can never be fully prepared. It does not matter the number of twists and turns in your life for which you plan. This life we live comes as it does. As I have said before, God does not send the events of this life to us, but God does indeed allow them to happen. And for that, my friends, we can only bring so much oil on the journey to keep our lamps lit. Last week, my friend asked me to go see her mom. I expected to enter the hospital room of a woman weak and fragile lying in bed, and instead I met a woman who could barely contain her energy. In 45 minutes, I could only get a brief reply to questions that were asked and then answered by the woman lying in the hospital bed. And you know I can talk with the best of them, but this woman had me at a disadvantage. And after 45 minutes and her daughter's dumbfounded look from the sofa in the hospital room, I looked at her and I said, "Can I pray?" And she didn't stop talking, but she did move to a whisper. And so I took her hand, and I took her daughter's hand, and her daughter completed the circle, and I bowed my head, and then the woman stopped talking. And I asked God for healing and for tending, but the moment that was the most powerful was when I started to say, "Our Father," to which this woman with perfect rhythm joined in every word. She was struggling to form words through her mouth. She knew what she wanted to say. It was hard for them to get out. She was bouncing from one time in her life to another. But when she heard "Our Father, which art in heaven," this woman was all present to the moment. And then, in that moment, I recognized God revealing God's self. The problem is that I am not always patient enough to wait for God to reveal God's self. Yes, I know God is present there, but sometimes I want to know that God is not just present, but that God is not sitting in the corner. God is active in the midst of who we are and what we are doing, that God is paying attention. God knows I do my most honest begging for God to show up when I have found myself the least prepared. It's not for lack of trying, but it is in those moments when I'm called to the emergency room to greet family in that waiting area, where the doors between emergency and waiting room are as big and strong as any story you have heard of Fort Knox. It's finding myself on the edge of the water, waiting, hoping, praying. It's being invited to the bedside. It's standing on the front porch of a house. It's sitting through preparations at the funeral home. It is the text message that I get that says, "Hey, could you pray for da 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 da," knowing that there is a ton more to the story behind that quick text. It's around the table in my office when someone walks in and says, "Can I just have 5 minutes?" They really need to teach in seminary. Start at 30 and work your way up. It's here at this pulpit. When I am invited into such moments to bring a word of peace or a reminder of God's promise, I am constantly reminded that I am never able to bring enough oil to light our lamps surrounded by the darkness of death. It turns out that in the end, only Jesus can fill us completely. Only Jesus chases away the darkness. Only Jesus breaks the chains that hold us back. Only Jesus breathes life into our dust. Only Jesus offers the living water our dry souls thirst for. No matter how much we have prepared, only Jesus fills us completely. I believe that our preparations are far less about what we carry with us, no offense to the 5 wise bridesmaids, and far more about where we keep our eyes focused. Maybe the story Jesus tells today is more about keeping our eyes on the one who calls us by name than keeping our bags packed and on our shoulders ready for the journey. It seems to me that yesterday I should have kept my eyes on the TSA rules. Do not take a bag from someone you do not know. And if you take a bag for a friend, do not tell the TSA agent the bag is not yours. If you want to take something away from the sermon today, these 2 words: travel light. Leave your baggage behind. Keep your eyes on the prize. My friends, the prize is Jesus. Most days, I believe, we often do the very best we can. Most days, I am glad to be able to give thanks to God for the sunrise and the love that surrounds me, and yet I am well aware that even on my best days, I can struggle. And there are days I am simply not prepared for what the world will bring to my doorstep or what the power of death will leave me in its wake. There are days when I cannot let go of what I'm carrying because I believe it is far too important to leave behind. When even as I keep my eyes on Jesus, I am lost for a moment of God's light in the darkness. It's in those moments when God chooses to remind me that only Jesus brings light to the darkness. Only Jesus brings life out of death. Only Jesus sets us free. And then, and only then, and am I able to let go of what I thought was so important so that Jesus can place into my open hands what will one day be. Thanks be to God. Amen.